A call from the hospital. My daughter was attacked. Dad, IT was him, the billionaire's son. Then a text came in. She said no to me. My father runs this city. You can't touch me. He was right, I couldn't. So I dialed a retired man in Sicily, her uncle. I spoke 2 words, family business. A deep voice answered on my way. What he did next left me trembling. This is a story about how quickly peace can shatter, and the chilling price a father will pay to protect his family when the system fails. It's about a moment when love for your daughter makes you realize that some lines aren't just blurry, sometimes they need to be crossed. My name is Truman Larson. For 20 years, I was deep in Army intelligence, and that life taught me 3 ironclad truths. Patience wins wars, information is the ultimate weapon, and evil men always believe they're untouchable. Right up until the moment they're not. I thought I'd left that world behind, trading classified briefings and overseas deployments for something quieter. Running a security consulting firm in Portland, the kind of legitimate work that paid the bills and, more importantly, let me be home for dinner most nights. My military pension gave us a cushion, and my reputation for being thorough kept clients coming back. Our life, our home in Beaverton, reflected our priorities: a good school, a neighborhood where kids still played outside, and enough space for my wife, Amber's, pottery studio in the converted garage. We bought it when our daughter, Karina, was 7. To this day, the pencil marks tracking her growth still decorate our kitchen door frame. Dad, I'm heading out. Karina called from the entryway that Friday evening. At 21, she'd inherited Amber's striking features and my stubborn determination. A combination that made her absolutely formidable when she set her mind to something. I looked up from my laptop at the kitchen table. Where to? Study group at Powell's, then maybe coffee with some friends. She was double majoring in political science and journalism at Portland State. My girl wanted to change the world, and I had 0 doubt she would. Text when you're on your way home, I told her. She rolled her eyes with affection. Always do, old man. Amber emerged from her studio, clay still dusting her forearms. Be safe, sweetheart. After Karina left, Amber settled into the chair beside me. You're working late on a Friday. Background check for a client. Guy's hiring a CFO, wants to make sure there are no surprises. I closed the laptop. But it can wait. We'd met 17 years ago at a gallery showing in Seattle. She was displaying her ceramic work. I was there because my unit was in town for a conference, and my commanding officer's wife had dragged us all along. Amber Moreno had been explaining the inspiration behind a series of vessels to a pretentious art critic, and I watched, captivated, as she expertly dismantled the man's condescending assumptions with grace and steel. I was smitten before we'd even exchanged a word. Her family story was complicated. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico when she was a baby, but her maternal uncle, Bruno, had stayed behind in Sicily, where the Moreno line originated. Bruno Moreno was a figure shrouded in family legend and careful silence. A man whose import-export business nobody discussed in detail. He'd visited twice during my marriage, both times for weddings. And both times, I noted the deference other men showed him. You're thinking about something, Amber said, pulling me back. Just grateful, I admitted. We've built something good here. She squeezed my hand. We have. Neither of us knew those would be the last peaceful moments for a very long time. Hashtag chapter 2. Broken. The call came at 10:47 a.m. I was already reaching for my phone before my eyes fully opened. That old combat instinct, recognizing the wrong time, the wrong ring. Amber sat up beside me as I answered. Mr. Larson, this is Dr. Patel from Emmanuel Hospital. Your daughter, Karina, was brought into our emergency department approximately 40 minutes ago. She's stable, but you should come immediately. The drive downtown was a blur. Amber sat rigid in the passenger seat, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. I kept my voice steady as I called Coleman Foster, my oldest friend, a detective with Portland PD. I need you to find out what happened, I said. Emmanuel Hospital. They said she's stable, but that's all I know. I'm on it, Coleman said immediately. I'll meet you there. The ER waiting room. Fluorescent lights made everyone look like ghosts. A nurse led us back immediately. Never a good sign when they don't make you wait. Dr. Patel met us outside a room, wearing that gentle expression I recognized, the one medical professionals wore when they had to deliver bad news. Your daughter was assaulted earlier this evening. She has a concussion, a broken nose, 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, and defensive wounds on her arms. We've completed a full examination and collected evidence for. I stopped hearing words. I was aware of Amber's hand gripping my arm, of Dr. Patel's mouth moving, but the roaring in my ears drowned everything out. Through the window, I could see Karina lying in the hospital bed. Her beautiful face a canvas of purple and black. Her left eye swollen shut. Can we see her? Amber's voice was barely a whisper. Inside the room, Karina's good eye opened when we entered. Mom, Dad. Her split lip made speaking difficult. I'm okay. Amber broke then, careful tears falling as she held our daughter's hand. I stood at the bedside, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly helpless. In Kandahar, in Baghdad, in a dozen other hellholes, I'd always known what to do. Always had a mission, a target, a plan. But standing here, looking at my broken daughter, I felt that careful control I'd spent decades building start to crack. Who did this? My voice was surprisingly calm. Karina's joy tightened. She had my stubbornness, and I saw her decide to tell us, despite her fear. Stanford Phelps. The name meant nothing to me then, but I'd learn. Oh, I'd learn everything. We met at a fundraiser last month for a campus advocacy group. He seemed charming, interested in the cause. He asked me to dinner tonight. Said he wanted to discuss funding. She paused, wincing. It was supposed to be at a restaurant downtown, but he changed locations last minute. Said his father's penthouse had a better view, better privacy for discussing donations. Amber's hand tightened on Karina's. He wanted. Karina's voice cracked. He said spending the night with him was the prize for his donation. When I refused, when I tried to leave. She couldn't finish. Did he? I couldn't complete the question. No. I fought. I screamed. I got away before a doorman heard and called 911. Her good I met mine. But Dad, he wasn't scared. Not even when the ambulance came. He just smiled and said his father would handle it. Coleman arrived 20 minutes later, his detective shield clipped to his belt and his expression grim. He'd been my roommate at basic training, stood as best man at my wedding, and was Karina's godfather. In the hallway outside her room, he delivered the news I'd already suspected. Stanford Phelps, 26. Only son of Robert Phelps, real estate developer, worth north of $3 billion. The kid has a sheet, but nothing that ever stuck. 3 prior assault allegations, all withdrawn. 2 DUIs that vanished. A sexual assault complaint from 2 years ago that got buried. How is that possible? Robert Phelps owns half the city council, funds the DA's campaigns, and has enough lawyers to form their own law firm. Coleman's voice was tight with anger. Uniform officers responded to the scene. Phelps's attorney was already there. By the time I heard about it and made calls, Stanford was home free. No arrest, no charges filed. The DA's office is calling it insufficient evidence to proceed. My daughter is in a hospital bed with a broken face. I know, Truman. And I'm telling you, this is bigger than what I can touch. The Phelps family is protected at levels that make my badge worthless. I stood very still. Then I'll handle it. Truman. Thank you for coming, Coleman. And for trying. But this is family business now. Something in my tone made Coleman step back. We'd known each other for 30 years. Had seen combat together. Had buried friends together. Coleman recognized that tone. Don't do anything that makes me have to arrest you. You won't, I promised. You won't find anything to arrest me for. I returned to Karina's room. She was asleep now, medicated and exhausted. Amber stood at the window, her reflection showing tear-streaked cheeks. Coleman says the man who did this will face no charges, I said quietly. I heard. Amber turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I'd rarely witnessed, cold fury. My brother. We should call Bruno. In 17 years of marriage, Amber had never suggested contacting her uncle for anything beyond birthday cards and wedding invitations. The fact that she was suggesting it now spoke volumes about the Moreno family's unspoken understanding. There were some problems the law couldn't fix, and Bruno Moreno specialized in the other kind. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She refused to spend a night with me. My dad owns this city. You can't touch me. I showed it to Amber. Her face went pale, then hardened. Call him, she said. Call Bruno. #### Chapter 3. The old world. I made the call from the hospital parking lot at 4 a.m. The number rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered in Italian. Uncle Bruno, I said in English. It's Truman Larson. Amber's husband. I remember who you are. Bruno's English carried the ghost of Italian vowels beneath American consonants. Why do you call it this hour? Karina was attacked, beaten badly. The man who did it is untouchable. Billions in family money, owns half the police force, and the district attorney won't touch him. Silence on the line, long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Then, tell me everything. I laid it out with military precision. The assault, Stanford Phelps's history, his father's influence, the text message. I spoke for 7 minutes without interruption. Karina is my blood, Bruno said when I finished. And you're family by marriage, which makes this my concern. I will arrive tomorrow evening. Do nothing until I get there. Bruno Truman. The voice carried steel. Now, in my world, we have a saying, revenge served hot burns only the hand that pours it. You are angry, and you should be. But anger makes men sloppy. Wait for me. We will handle this the right way. The call ended. I returned to Karina's room. She'd be kept for observation for at least 48 hours. I sent Amber home at dawn to rest, promising I'd stay with our daughter. In the quiet morning hours, I opened my laptop and began researching Stanford Phelps. The young man's social media was a monument to privilege and narcissism. Yachts in the Mediterranean, exclusive clubs, bottle service at nightclubs with different women every week. He'd attended Princeton but never graduated, instead joining his father's company in a vague executive role that seemed to involve attending parties and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Robert Phelps was easier to research. His profile was everywhere. Self-made billionaire, or so the story went. A real estate empire built on aggressive development and political connections. 3 marriages, each wife younger than the last. His current wife, Stanford's stepmother, was a former model, 20 years his junior. I dug deeper, using skills and access protocols I'd maintained from my intelligence days. The surface was all legitimate business, but in the margins, I found shadows. Lawsuits settled quietly, building code violations that vanished, competitors who mysteriously lost financing. Robert Phelps had built his empire on pressure and manipulation, and he'd raised his son to believe the same rules applied to people. Coleman called around noon. "I'm going to tell you something off the record, and you didn't hear it from me. Go ahead." Stanford Phelps was questioned this morning as a courtesy by a junior detective who doesn't know better. He lasted 5 minutes before the lawyer shut it down, but I got a copy of his statement. He claims Karina came to his apartment willingly, that they had a consensual encounter, and she only got upset when he wouldn't commit to funding her pet causes, so she became aggressive, and he was forced to defend himself. Then she accidentally fell. My knuckles went white around the phone. His lawyer also filed a counter-complaint, Coleman continued, claiming Karina was attempting to extort money from Stanford through false allegations, and that the Larson family should expect a defamation lawsuit. He's going to sue us? It's a pressure tactic designed to shut you down before you make noise, Truman. I'm sorry. This system is broken when it comes to guys like this. After Coleman hung up, I sat with that information. Stanford wasn't just confident he'd get away with it. He was actively on offense, weaponizing the legal system to threaten his victim's family. That evening, Karina was more alert. The swelling in her face had gone down marginally, but the bruises were deepening to ugly shades. Amber had returned, and we were trying to coax our daughter to eat soup when she suddenly looked up. "I need to tell you something." Her voice was clear now, determined. Before he smashed my phone, I was recording. I went very still. Recording what? When he changed the location, something felt off. So I started a voice memo app before I went inside. It was in my jacket pocket. The whole thing, him propositioning me refusing, him attacking me. It's all there. The phone was destroyed, but everything backs up to the cloud. Amber's hand flew to her mouth. "You have evidence." I gave the police my cloud password when they took my statement, but... She looked at her father. He said, "It won't matter. That evidence gets lost when people like Stanford are involved." I pulled out my phone and called Coleman immediately. "The recording from Karina's phone hasn't been logged into evidence yet." A pause. "No, nothing in the system." "Why?" "Because it exists." Full audio of the assault backed up to her cloud storage. Coleman's voice dropped. "Truman, if I know about this, I have to submit it officially. And if I submit it officially, it'll be in the system where his lawyers can see it and get it suppressed before anyone relevant hears it. Or it might just disappear." "Don't submit it yet," I said. "Give me 24 hours. You're asking me to sit on evidence. I'm asking you to be strategic about when and how you introduce it. 24 hours, Cole. Then do whatever you have to do." After another pause. 24 hours. "But Truman, be careful. These people don't play fair." "Neither do I said. And ended the call. Bruno Moreno arrived at Portland International at 6 p.m. I picked him up alone, Amber staying at the hospital with Karina. The man who emerged from the terminal looked nothing like the stereotype of a Sicilian mobster. At 72, Bruno was lean and weathered, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a single leather bag. His hair was silver, his face lined with decades of sun, and his dark eyes missed nothing. We embraced briefly. "Show me," Bruno said. At the hospital, Bruno sat beside Karina's bed for a long time, studying her injuries with an expression of stone. He took her hand gently, and when he spoke, his voice was soft and Italian. Words I didn't understand but recognized as some kind of vow. Then Bruno turned to me. "Now we talk somewhere private." We went to a 24-hour diner near the hospital. In a corner booth, Bruno ordered espresso and listened as I laid out everything I'd learned about Stanford and Robert Phelps, the corruption protecting them, and the existence of the recording. "This recording," Bruno said, "it is your ace. But played through their corrupt system, it will be neutralized. We must use it differently." "I'm listening." "You are intelligence." "Yes? You understand leverage and pressure points." Bruno sipped his espresso. "Robert Phelps has built an empire on corruption, which means he has many enemies. People he has crushed, cheated, destroyed. These people want revenge, but lack the means or the courage. We find them. We unite them. And we use your daughter's evidence not to convict his son, though that will be pleasant, but to destroy the father's empire. When the empire falls, the son becomes vulnerable. You're talking about a coordinated campaign. I'm talking about war, Bruno corrected. Not with guns. Those are crude and draw attention. War with information, with pressure, with fear. You expose Robert Phelps as the criminal he is. You collapse his political protection. And Stanford becomes just another violent man without a shield. Then Bruno's smile was cold. Then we handle him properly. This will take time. Good things do. Your daughter needs time to heal. You need time to build your case. And I need time to make some calls. Bruno leaned forward. In Sicily, we have an expression, _alonymic _, give your enemy not even the heart. But we are patient. We plan. We wait. And when we strike once and completely. I felt something settle in my chest. A sense of purpose. Of direction. This was a mission now, with objectives and strategy. What do you need from me? Everything you can find on Robert Phelps and his business. Every enemy, every rival, every person he has wronged. I will handle finding the ones with useful information and the courage to use it. You will handle the investigation and intelligence gathering. Together, we will build a trap. Bruno's eyes glinted. And when it closes, both Stanford and his father will wish they had never heard the name Larson. Chapter 4. Alliance's Karina came home 3 days later, moving slowly and staying mostly in her room. Amber took leave from the community college where she taught art, and the house took on the quiet, careful atmosphere of a place where someone was healing from trauma. My home office transformed into a war room. Bruno had taken a room at a nearby hotel, but he spent his days at the house, making phone calls in Italian and occasionally disappearing for meetings he didn't explain. The old man moved with surprising energy. His network of contacts apparently extended far beyond Sicily. I made some progress, Bruno announced on the 4th day, spreading documents across my desk. Roberto Phelps has been busy making enemies for 30 years. I have found 3 who are willing to help, if we can guarantee their safety and success. The first was Eric Ford, a former city councilman who'd opposed one of Robert's development projects and found himself facing fabricated ethics violations that destroyed his career. The second was Harvey Moran, a contractor who'd been forced into bankruptcy after Phelps used legal pressure to steal his company's largest project. The third was Andreas Wright, a journalist who'd written an investigative piece about Phelps's business practices and been sued into silence. They all have pieces of the story, Bruno explained, but separately, they lack the evidence and the courage to act. Together, properly orchestrated, they become dangerous. I'd been conducting my own investigation, using techniques I'd honed in military intelligence. I'd been mapping Robert Phelps's empire, shell companies, offshore accounts, and the complex web of political relationships that protected it all. What I'd found was extensive corruption, bribes to city officials, falsified building permits, intimidation of competitors, and systematic tax evasion. The question is how to make this public in a way that can't be suppressed, I said. Coleman Foster arrived that evening, officially off duty. In the war room, he studied the evidence I'd compiled with a detective's eye. This is good work, Coleman admitted. Better than good. This is prosecutable. But the DA won't touch it. Marcia Cantrell has been in Phelps's pocket for years. Her last 3 campaigns were funded by his PAC. So, we go over her head, Bruno said. The federal authorities, Coleman said. The FBI would need a reason to get involved. And they need to believe they have a case that won't be killed by political pressure at higher levels. I'd been thinking about this. What if it wasn't just about Robert Phelps? What if we connected his corruption to a broader pattern? Other developers, other politicians, a systemic problem that the feds couldn't ignore. Coleman's eyes narrowed. You need a trigger. Something that forces their hand and makes it a PR nightmare if they don't investigate. A scandal, Bruno said softly. Something public that cannot be ignored. Something that makes Robert Phelps radioactive to his political allies, forcing them to distance themselves. And in that moment of weakness, we introduce the evidence through channels he cannot control. I turned my laptop and pulled up Stanford Phelps's social media again. Stanford is throwing a party next weekend. Annual charity gala at his father's downtown tower. Politicians, business leaders, media coverage. He posts about it every year. Makes a big show of being philanthropic. You want to crash his party? Coleman asked. I want to make it the last party he ever throws, I said. Over the next 5 days, we planned. Bruno reached out to Eric Ford, Harvey Moran, and Andreas Wright, bringing them into the fold with promises of protection and revenge. Coleman used his connections to identify which FBI agents in the Portland field office were clean and which were potentially compromised by Phelps's influence. I focused on Stanford. The young man's arrogance was a gift. He documented everything online, creating a detailed record of his activities. I identified a pattern: multiple women who'd appeared in Stanford's social media photos and then vanished. Using my investigative skills, I tracked them down. The first was Diana Hurley, now living in Seattle. She didn't want to talk, hanging up when I mentioned Stanford's name. But I persisted, calling back with a different approach. My daughter was assaulted by Stanford Phelps, I said simply. I'm not a reporter. I'm not a cop. I'm a father trying to protect my child from a dangerous man. If he did something to you too, I need to. No, I'm not alone in this. After a long pause, her voice came, barely a whisper. He raped me 2 years ago at his apartment. I went to the police. I had bruises. I had a hospital examination. I had evidence. His lawyers made me sign an NDA and accept a settlement. Said if I ever spoke about it, they'd bury me in lawsuits. I needed the money for my mother's medical bills, so I signed. Would you be willing to break that NDA if I could guarantee he'd face consequences? Do you really think you can touch him? His family owns everything. I'm working on it. But I need to know I'm not wrong about who he is. Diana gave me 3 more names. By the end of the week, I had spoken to 7 women. 6 had stories similar to Karina's: assault, intimidation, NDAs, and settlements. 1 had been in high school when Stanford, then 23, had pursued her at a party. None of them would go on record. The fear Robert Phelps instilled was too deep. But they provided information, dates, locations, details that corroborated a pattern of predatory behavior spanning nearly a decade. This is valuable, Coleman said, reviewing my notes. But without testimony, it's still not enough. We have Karina's recording, I reminded him, which we haven't officially submitted to evidence, meaning it's not legally admissible in any current proceeding. Bruno had been quiet, listening to our debate. Now he spoke. You are thinking like men bound by their laws. We are not bound. The recording does not need to be evidence in a court. It needs to be heard by the public. I understood immediately. A leak. Not yet, Bruno cautioned. First, we set the stage. We prepare the battlefield. The charity gala is in 3 days. We use that event to create chaos in Robert Phelps's world. Then, in the midst of that chaos, we release the recording through channels that cannot be suppressed: social media, multiple news outlets simultaneously, directly to the FBI. By the time his lawyers react, it will be everywhere. And Stanford? I asked. Bruno's smile was cold. For him, we have a different plan. One that addresses the personal nature of his crime. ####Chapter 5. The setup: the charity gala was scheduled for Friday night at the Phelps Tower, a glass and steel monument to Robert's wealth overlooking the Willamette River. Tickets cost $10,000 per couple, with proceeds supposedly going to youth education charities. Though Andreas Wright's research had revealed that less than 15% of previous year's proceeds had actually reached charitable organizations. Bruno and my plan had multiple components, each designed to converge at the gala itself. Eric Ford, the former councilman, would attend as the guest of a city supervisor who owed him a favor. His job was to circulate among the politicians, reminding them quietly of Robert Phelps's vulnerable position should anyone choose to investigate seriously. Harvey Moran, the contractor, had used his industry contacts to discover that the Phelps Tower itself had serious building code violations, structural issues that had been covered up through bribed inspectors. He prepared a detailed report complete with photographic evidence, ready to be delivered to the appropriate city departments at precisely the right moment. Andreas Wright had spent the week reaching out to journalists he trusted. People who had been burned by the Phelps machine before and would jump at the chance to break a real story. He'd primed them with hints of a major scandal about to break, told them to watch social media Friday night, and made sure they had secure methods to receive leaked documents. Coleman's role was more delicate. He connected with FBI Special Agent Brett Hayes, an organized crime specialist who'd been quietly building a case against corruption in Portland's real estate development sector. Hayes was professional, careful, and most importantly, not in Robert Phelps's pocket. Coleman briefed him on the evidence I'd compiled, warning him that something significant would happen soon. I can't promise the Bureau will act immediately, Hayes had said. But if you can give me probable cause and evidence that hasn't been compromised by local corruption, I'll get it to prosecutors who will take it seriously. Bruno handled the most sensitive component through his connections, contacts I still didn't fully understand. He'd arranged for protesters to gather outside the gala. Not random activists, but people with legitimate grievances against Phelps developments, families displaced by his projects, workers who'd been cheated, communities destroyed by his aggressive tactics. Over 200 people, organized but peaceful, with signs and chants that would draw media attention. The optics will be devastating, Bruno explained. Robert Phelps throwing a lavish party while people he's harmed stand outside in the rain. The news cameras will love it. And Stanford. I pressed. Stanford will be at the party, playing the dutiful son, Bruno said. He will feel safe, surrounded by his father's power. That is when we strike. The day before the gala, I visited Karina. She was healing physically, the bruises fading from black to purple to yellow, the swelling in her face diminished. But I saw the shadows in her eyes, the way she startled at unexpected sounds, the anger simmering beneath her careful composure. "I want to help," she said when I explained the plan. "Absolutely not. You've been through enough." "Dad," her voice was firm. "He did this to me, and he's done it to other women. I can't just hide in my room while you try to fix it. I need to be part of this." Amber appeared in the doorway. "She's right, Truman." "Amber, I don't like it either. But Karina isn't a child, and this is her fight, too. We can't protect her by keeping her locked away. We protect her by making sure Stanford Phelps can never hurt anyone again." I looked between my wife and daughter, seeing the same fierce determination in both their faces. "What do you want to do?" I asked Karina. "The recording. When you release it, I want to release a statement with it. My name. My story. No anonymity. If other women see me stand up, maybe they'll find the courage to come forward, too. His lawyers will come after you. Let them try." Her jaw set in that stubborn way that was pure larceny. I'm done being afraid. Friday arrived. Cold and rainy. Typical November weather in Portland. The Phelps Tower glowed against the dark sky, its ground floor converted into an elegant venue with champagne fountains and a string quartet. Limousines and luxury cars delivered guests in designer gowns and expensive suits. Outside, protesters began gathering at 6 p.m., their numbers swelling to over 300. They carried signs reading, "Phelps destroys communities," and "Where's our housing?" Local news crews, tipped off by Andreas Wright's media contacts, arrived to cover the demonstration. Inside his hotel room, Bruno made final preparations. He was dressed in an immaculate suit, looking like any other wealthy attendee. I wore similar formal attire, though I felt ridiculous. I preferred tactical gear to tuxedos. "You're certain about your role?" Bruno asked. "Get inside. Locate Stanford. Keep eyes on him until the signal. And you remember, no violence?" "Not yet. Tonight is about destroying his father's empire. The personal accounting comes later." Coleman was positioned in an unmarked car outside, monitoring police frequencies and ready to intervene if things went sideways. Eric Ford was already inside, working the political crowd. Harvey Moran stood among the protesters, ready to release his building code report to the media the moment the signal came. At 7:03 p.m., exactly on schedule, I entered through the main doors with Bruno, blending into the crowd of wealthy donors. Security was professional but minimal. Robert Phelps was arrogant enough to believe his money made him untouchable even in public. The party was exactly what I'd expected, excessive wealth on display, people who'd never missed a meal congratulating themselves for helping the less fortunate. I spotted Robert Phelps near the bar, a thick man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident posture of someone who'd never been told no. And there, beside his father, was Stanford Phelps. The young man looked like a recruitment poster for inherited privilege, designer suit, perfect hair, a champagne flute in his hand, and a smug smile on his face. He was laughing at something a city councilwoman was saying, utterly at ease. I felt my hands clench. This was the man who'd beaten my daughter, who'd sent that mocking text, who'd walked away without consequences. Every instinct screamed to cross the room and break that smug face. But Bruno's hand touched my elbow briefly. A reminder. "Patience," Bruno murmured. "The trap is set. Now we spring it." ####Chapter 6. The Vice at 8 p.m. exactly. Andreas Wright triggered the first domino. From his position outside the building, he sent a coordinated message to 15 journalists simultaneously. "Phelps corruption scandal breaking now. Check social media and your secure inboxes." Then he posted a thread on social media, a carefully constructed narrative about Robert Phelps's criminal empire, complete with documents Harvey Moran had provided, photographs of building violations and evidence of bribes to city officials. Within minutes, it was being shared hundreds of times. Inside the gala, guests began checking their phones. Conversations started shifting, people stepping away to take calls. I watched Robert Phelps's face as someone showed him a phone screen. The confidence cracking, replaced by confusion and anger. Stanford noticed his father's reaction and pulled out his own phone. His expression of smugness faltered. "Now," Bruno said quietly. "We add fuel to the fire." He nodded to Eric Ford across the room. The former councilman approached several city officials, engaged them in what appeared to be pleasant conversation, then showed them documents on his tablet. Their reactions ranged from shock to fury. Several immediately left the party, presumably to call their attorneys or PR teams. At 8:15, Harvey Moran released his building code report to every news outlet in Portland. The Phelps Tower itself, this gleaming monument to Robert's success, was flagged as potentially dangerous, with structural deficiencies that could put occupants at risk. The irony was delicious. Robert Phelps's gala was being held in a building that might need to be evacuated. By 8:30, the party was in chaos. Half the guests had left. Reporters were calling for comment. The protesters outside had swelled to over 400, their chants audible even through the tower's thick glass. Robert Phelps stood in the center of the room, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders at someone. His face had gone red, veins visible in his neck. Around him, political allies and business associates were actively avoiding eye contact, the social equivalent of rats fleeing a sinking ship. And Stanford. Stanford looked genuinely frightened for the first time. He stood near the bar, isolated, as people who'd been laughing at his jokes minutes ago pretended not to see him. Now is his time, Bruno said. My phone buzzed. A message from Coleman, FBI en route to Phelps Tower. Hayes has authorization for immediate document seizure based on fraud evidence. ETA 10 minutes. Things were moving faster than planned. The trap was working almost too well. Bruno had pulled out his own phone, navigating to a private website. The recording, he said. Karina gave me permission to upload it to multiple platforms simultaneously. Once I press this, it will go live on 5 different social media platforms, 3 YouTube channels, and be emailed directly to 24 journalists. It cannot be stopped. Do it, I said. Bruno's finger touched the screen. Within seconds, Karina's voice filled the internet. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Phelps, but I'm not comfortable going to your apartment instead of the restaurant. I think I should leave. Then Stanford's voice, smooth and entitled, don't be difficult. I'm offering a very generous donation. All you have to do is be friendly. And Karina's response, firm, that's not what philanthropy means. I'm leaving. What followed was audio of the assault. Stanford's voice turning ugly, furniture crashing, Karina's screams for help, his casual laughter as he hit her. The recording lasted 8 minutes and captured everything. His confession that he expected sex in exchange for his donation, his assertion that his father owned the police, his threats about what would happen if she reported him. It was damning. It was crystal clear. And it was already viral. I watched Stanford's face go white as someone showed him a phone. The young man's hands were shaking. Robert Phelps pushed through the remaining crowd, grabbed his son's arm, and pulled him toward a private elevator. But before they could reach it, FBI agents entered the building. Hayes, leading a team of 6, all wearing blue windbreakers with yellow letters. Robert Phelps. Hayes announced, his voice carrying across the now silent room. We have a warrant to seize records related to Phelps Development Corporation's business practices. We're also placing you under investigation for fraud, bribery, and racketeering. Robert's face went from red to purple. You have no authority. We have plenty of authority, sir. Federal jurisdiction supersedes your local connections. Hayes gestured to his team. Secure all computers and file servers in this building. No one leaves until we've documented what we need. As FBI agents spread through the tower, Bruno leaned close to me. The empire falls. Now we handle the sun. But before we could move, Stanford Phelps did something stupid. Perhaps it was panic. Perhaps arrogance. Or perhaps just the instinct of a cornered animal. But he ran, not toward the elevator, but toward the emergency stairs, shoving past guests and knocking over a champagne fountain in his haste. Stop him! Robert shouted, but no one moved to help. Bruno and I followed at a measured pace. Coleman's voice came through the small earpiece I wore. I've got eyes on the back exit. He's heading for the parking garage. Stanford burst into the underground garage, looking wildly for his car. I emerged from the stairwell behind him, blocking the exit. Stanford Phelps, I said quietly. The young man spun around, and up close, I could see genuine fear in his eyes. Stay away from me. My father will have you arrested. Your father's currently being placed under federal investigation. His protection is gone. His money is about to be frozen. His lawyers are busy saving themselves. I took a step forward. Which means you're all alone. I didn't do anything to your daughter. She wanted. Finish that sentence, I said very softly, and I will break your jaw. We both know what you did. So do the 7 other women I found. So does everyone who's heard that recording by now. And, believe me, millions have heard it. Stanford's bravado crumbled completely. What do you want? Justice. I'll pay. My father will pay. Your father is bankrupt by morning. The FBI is seizing his assets. The city is shutting down his buildings. His political allies are running away so fast they're leaving skid marks. There is no money coming to save you. Bruno emerged from another stairwell, cutting off Stanford's other escape route. In Sicily, the old man said conversationally, when a man harms a daughter of our family, there's only one acceptable response. It is very old-fashioned. Very permanent. Stanford's legs actually buckled. Please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. You made many mistakes, Bruno said. The first was believing you were untouchable. The second was sending that arrogant text message to a father who loves his daughter. The third was existing in a world where men like me still exist. Coleman's voice in my ear. Truman, I've got 2 Portland PD units responding to the tower. Someone called about a disturbance. You need to clear up before they arrive and complicate things. But I wasn't finished. Do you know what my daughter is doing right now? While you're cowering in this garage, she's preparing to testify. To go on record. To put her name and face to what you did so that every other woman you've hurt knows they're not alone. That's courage, Stanford. Real courage. Something you'll never understand. I'll confess, Stanford said desperately. I'll turn myself in. I'll plead guilty. Just don't. Don't what? I asked. Don't hurt you? Don't make you face consequences? You're going to face consequences, Stanford. Legal ones, social ones, personal ones. The question is how badly you'll suffer before you do. Bruno produced a phone and showed Stanford the screen, a news article already posted, showing his face next to headlines about assault and rape allegations. Your name is ruined. Your life as you knew it is over. The question is whether you survive long enough to see the inside of a prison cell. That was when Stanford broke completely, dropping to his knees in the concrete garage, crying. I felt no satisfaction looking at him, only cold calculation. This man had hurt my daughter, and this moment of fear was only the beginning of what he'd pay. Let's go, I said to Bruno. He's not worth any more of our time. We left Stanford sobbing in the parking garage. By the time Portland police arrived, he was still there, incoherent and broken. Coleman later told me that Stanford had been taken into custody, not arrested, but protective custody because he was an active threat to himself. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Robert Phelps's empire was collapsing. Federal investigations were expanding, and Stanford Phelps faced potential charges from multiple assaults. The recording had been played on every major news outlet. Karina's statement had been read by millions, and 3 more women had come forward with their own stories. But for me, watching the news with Amber and Karina in our living room, it still wasn't enough. The legal system was moving. Yes, justice might be served through courts and lawyers and trials. But the personal accounting, the real prize for what Stanford had done, was still unpaid. Bruno seemed to read my thoughts. Patience, the old man said. The trap is closed. Now comes the final part. ####Chapter 7. The weakness revealed the weekend after the gala was chaos across Portland. Robert Phelps's arrest made national news. The FBI had found evidence of massive fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit bribery. His assets were frozen, his buildings sealed, and his political allies were tripping over themselves to return campaign contributions and delete old photos. Stanford Phelps, meanwhile, had been formally charged with assault and held on $500,000 bail, an amount his father could no longer pay. The young man sat in county jail and, according to Coleman's sources, was not handling confinement well. He's in protective custody, separated from general population, Coleman reported. For his own safety. Good, Karina said coldly. She was getting stronger every day, her bruises fading, and her spine straightening with determination. She'd done a televised interview, speaking clearly and calmly about her assault, and the response had been overwhelming. Support poured in from across the country, along with offers of legal assistance and counseling resources. More importantly, 8 additional women had come forward with allegations against Stanford spanning back to his college years. The DA has no choice but to prosecute aggressively now, Coleman said. Marcia Cantrell is trying to save her career by throwing Stanford under the bus. She's talking about seeking maximum sentences on all counts. But something was bothering me. The legal system was working. Yes, Stanford would likely spend years in prison. Robert's empire was destroyed. Justice, by conventional measures, was being served. So why did it still feel incomplete? Bruno had been quiet, spending his days making phone calls and meeting with contacts whose names he never shared. On Monday evening, he requested a private meeting with me at his hotel. The boy will go to prison, Bruno said, pouring us both whiskey from his minibar. Probably 8 to 12 years with good behavior. He will survive. Men like him often do. Protected even in jail by his remaining family connections. He will be humiliated, certainly. Broken, perhaps. But alive and free eventually. You're saying that's not enough. I'm saying you have a choice. Bruno sat across from me. The legal system will deliver its version of justice. For many people, that would be sufficient. But in my world, we understand that some crimes require a more permanent response. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about ensuring he never hurts another woman ever. Bruno's eyes were steady. In Sicily, when a man commits an unforgivable act against a family, there is no half measure, no counting on parole boards or rehabilitation. There is only finality. I stared at my whiskey. I'd killed men before in combat, in the course of my military service. But this was different. This was premeditated. This was revenge, not war. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, but think quickly. He is vulnerable now. In custody, his father unable to protect him. This window will not remain open forever. That night, I lay awake beside Amber, wrestling with the question. I'd spent 20 years serving my country, believing in justice and law and order. I'd left that life behind to be a good husband, a good father, a good citizen. Taking the law into my own hands, taking a life in cold blood, was crossing a line I'd never imagined crossing. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Karina's broken face in a hospital bed. I heard Stanford's voice on that recording, laughing as he assaulted a helpless woman. I remembered that text message, _, you can't touch me. _ the law would punish Stanford, but would it protect the next woman who crossed his path a decade from now? When he was released on parole, would it prevent him from hurting someone else's daughter? Wednesday morning brought news that complicated everything. Andreas Wright called me directly. You need to see this. The journalist had uncovered something new, evidence that Robert Phelps had been quietly liquidating offshore assets despite the FBI's seizure orders. Money had been moved to accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, over $200 million that federal investigators didn't know about. He's preparing to run, Andreas explained. And if he runs, he takes Stanford's defense fund with him. There are rumors of a deal being negotiated. Robert might flip on his political co-conspirators in exchange for reduced charges and witness protection. If that happens, Stanford might walk on a technicality, double jeopardy, fruit of the poisonous tree, something. His lawyers are already filing motions. I felt ice in my veins. How possible is this? It's the federal system. Strange things happen. And Robert Phelps has information that could destroy dozens of powerful people. If he offers to talk, the prosecutors might prioritize that over putting his son away. That afternoon, Coleman confirmed it. There's talk of a deal. Robert has evidence of corruption going up to the state level, governors, senators, federal contractors. The FBI wants that information more than they want Stanford's conviction. I'm sorry, Truman. It's politics. Karina found me in my office that evening, staring at nothing. Dad, are you okay? How do you feel about the idea that Stanford might not go to prison? She was quiet for a long moment. I'd be angry, but I'd survive. Because at least his life is destroyed. At least everyone knows what he did. What if he rebuilds? What if he changes his name, goes somewhere else, and in 10 years he's hurting women again? Karina sat down beside me. Then I want someone to stop him permanently. Karina, she said, her voice soft but firm, I know what you and Uncle Bruno are discussing. Mom told me, and I know you're struggling with it because you're a good man. She took my hand. But Dad, sometimes good men have to do hard things to protect people from bad men. That's what you did in the army, right? Made hard choices so other people would be safe. That was war. This is different. Is it? Stanford Phelps is a predator. He's hurt at least 9 women that we know about, probably more. If the legal system lets him go, what happens to the next woman? What happens to her father? He'll be standing where you are now, wondering if he should have done more to stop it. I looked at my daughter, my brave, brilliant, damaged daughter, and saw the weight of truth in her eyes. She wasn't asking me to kill for revenge. She was asking me to kill to prevent future harm. The difference was subtle but significant. I'll think about it, I said quietly. That night, I made my decision. ####Chapter 8. The final move. Bruno's plan was simple and elegant, the kind of thing that only a man with decades of experience in violence could devise. Stanford is in protective custody, separated from other inmates. But every prisoner has access to the infirmary. And every infirmary has blind spots. You have someone inside? I asked. I have someone who has someone inside. The chain is sure enough to be reliable, long enough to have deniability. But you must be certain, Truman. Once we do this, there is no undoing it. Are you certain? I thought about Karina's bruised face. I thought about the 8 other women and the unknown number who'd been too frightened to come forward. I thought about Stanford's smug smile at that gala and his father's arrogant certainty that money could buy anything, even immunity from consequences. And I thought about the fact that the legal system, the system I'd spent my life believing in, was preparing to let a serial rapist walk free because his father had valuable information. I'm certain, I said. But I have conditions. Name them. It has to look natural or accidental. No execution-style murder that starts an investigation. And I want to be there. I want to see it happen. Bruno studied me for a long moment. This will change you. Seeing a man die, even a man who deserves it, is different from making the decision. Are you prepared for that? I've seen men die before. Not like this. In combat, death comes quickly with adrenaline and chaos. This will be slow and deliberate. You will have time to think, time to doubt, time to regret. And you cannot show any of that. You must watch him die and feel nothing. Show nothing. Because any crack in your control is a risk to all of us. I understand. Then we proceed. But Truman, after this, you can never go back. There is no version of you that exists after this moment who did not participate in murder. You must accept that. I've been thinking about this for 3 days. I'd examined my conscience, my values, my identity. I'd asked myself if I could live with the alternative, Stanford alive, potentially free, potentially hurting more women. And I'd found that I couldn't. Some men need killing. My drill sergeant had said that once, years ago, discussing enemy combatants. It had seemed harsh then. Now it seemed like simple truth. I accept it, I said. Then tomorrow night. The infirmary has late shift coverage that is sympathetic to our cause. Stanford has been complaining of chest pains, stress from his incarceration. He will be moved to the infirmary for observation. There will be a window of approximately 30 minutes when certain security cameras are undergoing routine maintenance. During that window, he will suffer a medical emergency, a heart attack, very sudden, very fatal. The official cause will be undiagnosed heart condition exacerbated by stress. He is young, but it happens. How do I get inside? You don't. We have a camera feed that will show you everything. You will watch from a secure location. And when it is done, you will confirm he is dead. Then we all walk away and never speak of this again. That seemed wrong to me. If I was going to order a man's death, I should have the courage to witness it directly, to own what I'd done. But Bruno was right about the practical concerns. My physical presence at the scene would be an unnecessary risk. Show me the feed, I said. Bruno produced a laptop and opened an encrypted program. The screen showed a grainy black and white view of a small infirmary room. One bed, basic medical equipment, a single door. This is the room. Tomorrow night, Stanford will be in that bed. And he will not leave. The next day was surreal. I went through the normal motions. Breakfast with Amber and Karina, a client meeting by video call, paperwork for my security consulting business. But all of it felt distant, like I was watching someone else live my life. Coleman called around noon. The prosecutors offered Robert Phelps a deal this morning. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges and witness protection. It's happening, Truman. Stanford's defense team is already filing motions to suppress evidence, claiming it's fruit of an illegal investigation. They might actually get him off. Thanks for letting me know, I said, my voice steady. At 8 p.m., I drove to a storage unit on the outskirts of the city. Bruno was already there along with two men I'd never seen before. Both middle-aged, both with the careful eyes of people who'd done violence professionally. Nobody offered names. Nobody shook hands. Bruno set up the laptop on a card table. The feed is live. Stanford was transferred to the infirmary 20 minutes ago, complaining of chest pains and difficulty breathing. The doctor on duty examined him, found nothing wrong, but admitted him for observation. The night nurse just started her shift. She is one of ours. She will ensure no one else enters that room. The screen showed Stanford lying in the infirmary bed, looking pale and frightened. Good, I thought. Let him be frightened. Let him know what it feels like to be helpless. How does it happen? I asked. One of the silent men spoke for the first time. Potassium chloride injection. Causes immediate cardiac arrest. When administered properly, it's nearly undetectable in routine autopsy. Combined with his documented anxiety and high-stress situation, the cause of death will be listed as heart failure. Natural causes. Who administers it? The nurse. She'll go in at 10 p.m. to check his vitals. She'll inject it into his foreline. He'll be dead within 90 seconds. She'll wait 5 minutes, then discover the body and call for help. By the time anyone responds, it'll be too late. The official story is that he died suddenly of a heart condition no one knew he had. I watched the screen. Stanford was alone in that room, probably terrified, probably praying his father would somehow save him. But Robert Phelps was in federal custody. His empire destroyed. His power gone. Stanford was truly alone for the first time in his life. The minutes crawled. Bruno offered whiskey. I declined. My head needed to be clear for this. I needed to remember every moment, to own what I was doing, to accept the weight of it. At 9:05 p.m., a nurse entered the frame. A woman in scrubs who moved efficiently around the room, checking monitors and adjusting Stanford. Stanford spoke to her. The feed had no audio, but his body language was pleading. The nurse's expression was professionally neutral. She produced a syringe from her pocket, checked it carefully, and approached the foreline. This was it. The moment. I could still stop it. I could call out, tell Bruno to abort, let the legal system handle things however it would. I could preserve the version of myself who'd never ordered a man's death. But then I thought of Karina's words, what happens to the next woman? The nurse inserted the syringe into the foreport. Stanford's body went rigid. His back arched off the bed, hands clutching at his chest, his mouth open in what must have been a scream, though the silent feed robbed it of sound. He thrashed for perhaps 30 seconds, then went still. The nurse watched dispassionately, checking her watch. After a minute, she checked his pulse, then his pupils. Then she calmly walked to the door and left the room. I watched Stanford's body for another minute, waiting for some sign of life, some movement. Nothing. Stanford Phelps was dead. It's done, Bruno said quietly. One of the silent men shut down the laptop and began breaking down the setup. Within 5 minutes, the storage unit was empty, except for Bruno and me. How do you feel? Bruno asked. Nothing, I said, and realized it was true. I'd expected guilt, regret, horror, or something. But watching Stanford die had felt like watching a problem solve itself. Cold. Mechanical. Necessary. That's good, Bruno said. The guilt comes later. Maybe. Or maybe not. Some men are built for this kind of work, and they never regret what must be done. Time will tell which kind you are. We drove back to the city separately. I arrived home at midnight. Amber was still awake, sitting in the living room with a book she wasn't reading. Is it done? She asked. Yes. She nodded slowly. I'm not going to ask details. I'm not going to judge. But Truman, promise me this was the last time. Promise me we don't become people who solve problems this way. I promise, I said, and meant it. I'd crossed a line tonight, but I wouldn't make a habit of it. This was an exception, a specific response to a specific threat, not a new way of life. Amber embraced me, and we stood together in the quiet house, holding each other against the darkness we'd invited in. ####Chapter 9. Aftermath. The news broke at 6 a.m. Stanford Phelps had died of sudden cardiac arrest while in custody. The county medical examiner ruled it natural causes, likely related to an undiagnosed heart condition exacerbated by the stress of incarceration. An investigation was opened, but preliminary findings showed no signs of foul play. Robert Phelps, from his own federal holding cell, reportedly broke down upon hearing the news. His deal with prosecutors moved forward anyway. He had too much valuable information about too many powerful people. He would spend 10 years in minimum security and then vanish in witness protection. His empire gone, but his life preserved. Some might call that injustice. I called it acceptable collateral damage. The father had lost everything that mattered, his legacy, his reputation, his only son. Let him live with that. The following week brought a cascade of revelations. Robert's testimony implicated 32 public officials in corruption schemes spanning 15 years. The mayor resigned. The district attorney was indicted, and Oregon's governor announced she wouldn't seek re-election. The fallout would reshape Portland politics for a generation. For the Larson family, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Karina continued her recovery, attending therapy and finding strength in survivor advocacy work. She'd become a voice for women who'd been silenced by powerful men, speaking at universities and legislative hearings about the need for justice system reform. I think I want to go to law school, she told me one morning over breakfast. I want to be the kind of lawyer who fights for people like me, who makes sure men like Stanford don't get away with what they do. You'd be brilliant at it, I said, pride thickening my voice. Amber returned to teaching, finding solace in creating beauty with clay and helping students discover their own artistic voices. She never asked me for details about what happened in that storage unit, and I never offered them. Some things were better left unspoken between people who loved each other. Coleman Foster was promoted to detective sergeant, his role in exposing the Phelps corruption earning him commendations. He and I still met for coffee every Friday, talking about sports and family and anything except the night Stanford died. Bruno Moreno stayed in Portland for another week, long enough to ensure no investigation into Stanford's death gained traction. Then, one evening, he appeared at our house with his leather bag packed. I return to Sicily tomorrow, he announced. The business here is finished. Karina embraced him carefully. Her ribs were still healing. Thank you, Uncle Bruno, for everything. Family is everything, Bruno said simply. Never forget this. At the door, Bruno pulled me aside. You did well. The boy is gone. The father is destroyed. And justice, true justice, has been served. But Truman, remember what I told you. This kind of work changes a man. Watch yourself carefully. Make sure the darkness you invited in does not make itself at home. I will, I promised. Bruno studied me for a moment, then nodded. You are stronger than most. You will be fine. But if you ever need counsel, if the weight becomes too heavy, you call me. Some burdens should not be carried alone. After Bruno left, I stood on my porch in the cool November evening, looking at the quiet suburban street where my family had built their life. Nothing looked different. Same houses, same streetlights, same normalcy. But I was different. I'd stepped outside the bounds of law and order, had taken justice into my own hands, had ordered a man's death, and I didn't regret it. That should have troubled me more than it did. But when I thought about Stanford Phelps, I felt only satisfaction. A predator had been removed from the world. Women were safer because of it. My daughter could heal, knowing her attacker would never hurt anyone again. If that made me a monster, I could live with being a monster. 3 months later, in February, I sat in my office reviewing a routine corporate background check when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you. It was from Diana Hurley, the woman in Seattle who'd been assaulted by Stanford 2 years earlier. She sent a link to a news article about a scholarship fund being established in Stanford's memory, funded by settlements from several of the women he'd assaulted who'd banded together to support survivors of sexual violence. We're turning his death into something positive, Diana wrote. Making sure some good comes from all the pain. I don't know exactly what happened to him in that jail cell, but I know you were involved somehow. So, thank you for believing us, for protecting other women, for doing what the law wouldn't do. I deleted the message immediately. No record, no trail. But I allowed myself a small smile. The darkness I'd invited and hadn't made itself at home. It had simply eliminated a threat and then departed, leaving my family safe and my conscience clear. That evening, I found Amber in her studio working on a new piece, a series of vessels representing strength emerging from brokenness. She looked up as I entered, clay on her hands and peace in her expression. How was your day? She asked. Good, I said. Routine client work. Nothing exciting. That's good. Boring is good. We'd become experts at normal conversation and maintaining the surface of our life while carrying the weight of what we'd done underneath. It was its own kind of courage, I thought. The courage to live with difficult truths and still find joy in ordinary moments. Karina was upstairs studying for her LSAT, her future taking shape in the aftermath of her trauma. She was stronger now, her spirit unbroken despite everything Stanford had tried to break. She would heal, and she would thrive, and she would help other women do the same. And Stanford Phelps was gone. Not by the legal system, not by the slow wheels of justice, but by the old ways. Family defending family. The strong protecting the weak. Evil men facing consequences they thought they'd escaped. Bruno had been right. It was very old-fashioned, very permanent, and very, very necessary. I walked through my home, listening to Amber's music playing softly from the studio, hearing Karina's voice as she read practice questions aloud to herself, feeling the warmth of the life we'd built together. This was what I'd fought for. This was what I'd protected, and I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had to. But I hoped, deeply, sincerely, hoped that I'd never have to. One trip into that darkness was enough for any man. I'd seen what I was capable of when my family was threatened. Had learned that my moral lines were less fixed than I believed. That knowledge would stay with me forever. A shadow in my mind that could never be fully banished. But shadows served a purpose. They reminded you where the light was and what was worth protecting. And as I stood in my home, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some men need killing, and some fathers love their daughters enough to become the men who do what needs doing. The world was safer for it, and the Larson family was whole.